diameter. A log from those trees, if you cut them, an 18-inch log would weigh about 75 pounds. Those are lodgepole pines at high elevation. So there's nothing, you couldn't have run those over with a small bulldozer. Saw a couple of knockovers. They weren't blowdowns, they were knockovers. And saw some tree breaks and was looking around. Ran across a few tracks, but from a distance, after I'd walked about an hour and a half, 2 hours, got to a more elevated area and sat down on some boulders, kind of a little alcove area, and sat down in there and then climbed up on top and was glassing with my binoculars and saw a troop. I would say about 8 individuals. And they had some young with them, but they weren't real young. They were walking, and probably the younger ones were probably 5 foot tall. The rest of them, I would think, were taller than that, maybe double that height. A couple of them seemed to be around 10 foot tall. The rest looked to be 7 to 8. And they were, 2 of them were in a position where they would maybe ambush something, and the others broke away, and I watched them for about a half an hour. And the others broke away like they were going to try to run up behind something and push them through a choke point, ambush point. I watched that for a while. Once, by the time that they had all disappeared behind the rocks, I stuck around for another 10 minutes and finally gave it up. I didn't want to lose the light. But there's definitely a population of Bigfoot there. They get heavy snows there, so we figure they came out of I had a guy with me. We figure they came out of the Wymanooch Wilderness area, which is pretty much straight up and down. That's the headwaters for the San Juan and the Rio Grande River and about a half a dozen creeks and a couple other rivers.
Evening, folks. Tonight I'm going to play a few sections of an interesting interview, an encounter that I thought was interesting. It pointed out a lot of features or characteristics of Bigfoot. I think I went past there. See what we got here.
And saw a troop. I would say about 8 individuals. And they had some young with them, but they weren't real young. They were walking, and probably the younger ones were probably 5 foot tall. The rest of them, I would think, were taller than that, maybe double that height. A couple of them seemed to be around 10 foot tall. The rest looked to be 7 to 8. And they were, 2 of them were in a position where they would maybe ambush something, and the others broke away, and I watched them for about a half an hour. And the others broke away like they were going to try to run up behind something and push them through a choke point, ambush point. I watched that for a while. Once, by the time that they had all disappeared behind the rocks, I stuck around for another 10 minutes and finally gave it up. I didn't want to lose the light. But there's definitely a population of Bigfoot there. They get heavy snows there, so we figure they came out of I had a guy with me. We figure they came out of the Wymanooch Wilderness area, which is pretty much straight up and down. That's the headwaters for the San Juan and the Rio Grande River and about a half a dozen creeks and a couple other rivers. Runs all the way over almost to the Utah border. Huge, massive area. It's probably the biggest wilderness area in the United States. My cousin had hunted in there, and he'd had some experience around them also.
I'm curious, when you saw these, did you know that what you were looking at? Did you think, those are...
Well, yeah, by that time, there's nothing else they could have been. I ran it through my mind, hunters or one thing or another, but when I saw the young ones first, and then I saw one beside them that was 3 foot taller, and then I saw a couple that were a couple foot taller than her, there's nothing else it could have been, and I was thinking boogers. This was my first experience of actually seeing them. This was in '84. I'd seen lots of tracks and things before that and heard a lot of vocalizations that actually been run out of a couple places, but from stones being thrown and screams and different things. But this is the first time I'd actually laid eyes on them.
For the audience, can you describe what you saw Can you describe what they looked like?
They all look like Patty. I saw them from 100 yards in binoculars, and they all looked like that Patty type. They were big. They were boxy. You couldn't tell where their waist was. They were straight on up and down, and the two that I saw that I think were over 10 foot, they were monsters. They were probably, I'm from a distance. I'll be conservative, but I'd say they were 3.5 to 4 foot wide. They were big. One of them got around the smaller one for a little bit, and I was able to judge. And my God, they had to be 3.5, 4 foot wide. One of them he had to be over 4 foot wide at the shoulders. And they were boxing. I mean, they didn't have a waist break. They went all the way down. They were what I saw on that video of Patty. But of course, I'm looking through binoculars, so they were. A couple of them had some brown tint to them. Most of them were black, and they had the cone heads, huge arms, just massive, and. I was glad they were at that much distance from me, because I wouldn't have wanted to have dealt with them. The guy that was with me saw him too. He was using a rifle scope. He pretty much had a meltdown. So he didn't want to go back up there. I figured it's a big area, and they had to rescue. They had a big rescue operation, and they had to come in and haul them all out by helicopter. They had 10 foot of snow there, and Wolf Creek Pass, which is off to the northwest, it opened on Halloween, had free skiing. Now, we got hit with an Indian summer come November, but there was no getting back up in there. There's just no way. So I never did get to go up there and hunt. That was my one trip up there to go and look around. Now, I've hiked in the Waimanuche out of Durango, but never into, I was in my Jeep. We'd gone high. There's roads that go up there, but when they get that amount of snow, even 67 degree weather for a week is not going to make any difference with that. They had over 10 foot of snow come in 3 or 4 days.
Did the creatures vocalize at all when you were down there?
I heard a hoop, but I could see they were talking to one another. I mean, one of them was nodding back to the other one, but no, we were too far away. I did hear a tree knock before I left. When I was walking back to the Jeep, I heard a tree knock, but I didn't really realize at the time that's what it was. But I heard like somebody hit something with an axe.
As you were watching these things through a binocular, it appeared they were communicating and talking to each other?
Well, yeah, the one was when they first got there and kind of settled down into what they were going to do, and the females were going to go, with the young ones, and they kind of got behind some boulders that were a little ways back. I saw them pointing with their fingers or their hands, running their hands out in that direction, and I had a pretty good set of binoculars. I didn't see lips move, no.
It appeared that they were communicating.
If you and I had been up there with some other guys and we were giving them directions on what to do, it was kind of like what I'd see with people. Yeah.
I think that's fascinating. I think that's really interesting. And so what did you guys do next? You just left?
We got back to the Jeep and went on, and then when we came back a little farther and got to the end of the road, and we decided by then it was about 5:30, maybe 6, and we decided if we were going to get out of there and get back to a main road before it was plumb dark, we needed to get going. And so when we came back through that area, I didn't get out to look for him. Because, my friend was spooked, and by then he'd spooked me. Him being spooked had kind of spooked me a little bit, and what kind of damage there was. And I had done that a lot in the previous years. The county, and it doesn't really have a name, except it's the edge of the Waimanuche. The Waimanuche is straight up and down, and there's not very many people going there. My cousin is a mountain man, and he was running a small ranch at the edge of it, and he went in there with the game ranger. My cousin had been there 3 months, and he was having to take the game ranger back in there, because even the game ranger was in charge of it didn't know how to get back in there. The Canejos is a big open area, high elevation open area. The Waimanooch is straight up and down. It's the biggest wilderness area in Colorado. This is right next to it.
Yeah, what's up?
This is over straight east of Durango.
One of the encounters I found fascinating, what happened to you in the mid-'90s, I believe, and
what kind of damage there was. And I had done that a lot in the previous years in Oklahoma and Kansas, southeast Kansas, and parts of Texas. When they had the 93, I had gotten out of the business, but when they had the 93, 94 floods, I got a phone call and I was back in business. And the water had been up there from the Missouri River it was anywhere from 30 to 60 feet, 30 to 60 miles wide, 30 foot deep, and was up over 90 days. And so the Missouri River had changed its river that had moved over into new riverbed, carved out new riverbed, and I guess they call it changing the course of the river. But it was bad. I got there right at the end of the water receding. There were still cattle. We saw cattle corpses in trees 30 feet up in the air. Cattle stuck in trees. It was one of the weirder things I've ever been around. And they floated up there, got stuck, couldn't get down. And you could tell from the markings, the bark missing on the trees, they kicked quite a bit trying to get out of that. They even had a cemetery that washed out, and they had graves in there that went back to this is right at the edge of one of the towns. They had graves in there that had been in there since Civil War. And they washed it out, and there were stories of people finding corpses up and down the Missouri River downstream of there that still had the pillow under their heads. And so there was a lot of strange stuff. And but I had been in Carroll County, in southern part of Carroll County, and I'd been looking at some farms, and the berms had broke. Parts of the farms had gone into the river. And so I was driving a Taurus station wagon, a little front-wheel drive at the time. I got out and went over a berm, looked at the river, took some pictures, and I had come farther north. The berm was a north-south berm, and the river had flowed parallel to that berm and then made a big, wide bend. This is a Missouri River. It's a big river. And wasn't always real wide, maybe 50 to 100 feet in some places, or 50 to 100 yards in some places. But there were places it was a lot wider than that. But it was deep. This is a Missouri River floating out of Montana. Yeah. It had taken the topsoil off a lot of farms and ruined them, etc. And so I was in there, and that half of that farm was gone. And so I had walked up pretty much as far as I could get to where the river had cut, and then I crossed back over the berm, and I knew there was an east-west berm farther north, and I wanted to go up there and see how far it was to the river. It looked to me like the river was pretty close to the edge of that east-west berm. And so I'd come farther north, and I came back across, and the bushes, and I got hit with, right before I went over the berm, I got hit with the same kind of feeling I'd felt over in southwest Colorado. And I thought, what in the world? And so I came over the berm, and I'd already decided I was going to get to the car once I felt that I didn't need to go look up there. I could give that guy a write-off. That farm was written off. And so I came over the berm, and about 30-foot high berm or levee. They call it levee some places. It was just made out of dirt. I came over that and came around some bushes, and when I did, I turned to the north, and I was going to see how far I could go, just kind of get an eye shot of it before I made my way to the car, and came face to face with these things. They were probably 50 yards away. I had turned, and now I'm facing them, and boom, there they are. I was about 50 yards from the edge of that berm. There was some trees that had been planted, I guess a tree row or something that had been planted there, and part of it had been taken out. I don't know. Oklahoma, we call them windbreaks, where you plant you plant trees along an area to keep it from blowing. There's a booger, and he was in between two trees, had his feet planted, and he was rocking back and forth. And then I saw just beyond him, over the berm, another one that seemed to be on its hands and knees. That was that part of that berm had been washed out pretty much. And the other one was on its hands and knees, and it glanced up at me and then went back down and looking where it was at. Now I'm looking at this thing, and it's looking at me, and we just kind of locked gazes, and I'm thinking, what in the world, and what should I do? The infrasound quit, and it looked like I had taken it by surprise. I think that's what I had found, what I'd been feeling earlier before I walked over the berm. But I think it was expecting me to come out where I went in. And when I came out farther north, closer to it, I think it took it by surprise. It looked surprised for a little bit, and then it just kind of looked like it was interested. But it's still kind of rocking back and forth between the trees. I'm 6'2", 50 yards away. I'd say it was at least 1.5 feet, maybe 2 foot taller than me. And it was all black. From its nipples up, it looked like Patty. From that part down, it was skinnier. So I've heard the guys on Bigfoot Outlaws talk about the Neanderthal type. I think that's probably what this was. But it was built. I'd say it was at least 3.5 foot wide, and at the shoulders. And it was cut, and it went way down. It had a real small waist, and huge thighs. Looked like an athlete, big time. I got a friend that was a quarterback that was in pro football for a little while, and it looked like him, only bigger. All black, had hair on his face, didn't see a cone, had kind of didn't see any ears, but it had a lot of hair around the side of its face, had hair on its face. It just kind of rocked back and forth. The other one, I know what they were doing, a little sidebar. When the water receded, there were crawdads everywhere. There were crawdad holes. I saw some farms that were completely taken over by crawdads. It was too wet to get in there with a tractor, and they were just, I probably have seen during that, when I was looking at those farms, 2 or 3 million, at least 2 million crawdad holes, where they call them mud bugs, where I was from, and they had gotten into that soft, they came in with the river and multiplied. They were everywhere, where the water had been slow to recede. The one that was on its hands and knees, I kind of knew what was up. I thought, immediately I thought crawdads, mud bugs, and that they're digging for mud bugs. The one that was on its hands and knees, it's kind of hard to judge because I don't know what level the dirt was on the other side of that berm, but if it was like the way I think it was, that sucker was about 5 foot tall on its hands and knees. Because judging by where it came up to on the other one. It looked at me. It looked like it was going to get up, but then its attention was drawn back down. I think they'd been digging for mud bugs, and that's what they were doing. There were no deer back in the area yet. I think they were down there looking, eating mud bugs. It seemed to me like when the one that was on its hands and knees, it was more brown. It distinctly looked brown. Parts of it were even a lighter brown. But it looked like it had a lot of black on it too. It was a kind of a weird color. But the one that was standing up and had come to deal with me was black. And the way the one kept looking down, and then finally I could see it was doing something. I think that it had they had a bunch of mud bugs up, and that they were starting to get away. And I think its attention was more on those crawdads than it was on me. So that's kind of what I deduced. So, but the one that I was looking at, there came a point where I got hit in the chest with some rumbling, and the way that its manner was is I needed to go. But we looked at each other probably 20 seconds, and then when that 20 seconds was up, I got hit with the rumbling in my chest, and I knew that I needed to go. I needed to go right then, and I spun on the ball of my foot and went straight for the car. And I looked back a bit, but he didn't follow me evidently. I got through the bushes and back to my car and kind of went along the edge of that berm and then made my way to the car, and I got the heck out of Dodge.
50 yards is about
All right, folks, I just want to play that for you because I thought that was a pretty interesting account. The way he describes that the Bigfoots were using their hand signals like they were directing traffic and that kind of thing. Just like humans do. I don't believe I've ever heard of or seen monkeys doing that to that degree. I think it's usually some very basic gestures. Well, not monkeys, but apes, I guess. I should make that distinction. Hello, Lorraine. Or Laney. John, Crypto. Who else is in here? Hello, Amy. Paula.
Hello.
How are you all doing tonight?
Hi.
Paula, you have your microphone working.
I do. I figured it out.
Good for you. So, Paula, do you have something? An encounter? Or are you just in here for the talk?
Just for the talk, I didn't have an encounter that was as dynamic as many of the people that joined this forum. Do you want me to tell it now?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, I was in Northern California where my family lives, and I was up in the Stanislaus National Forest, which is in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and it was November, and there was quite a large snowfall there, and I had taken my children up the road. I think it's off of Highway 4. That particular area, I believe, is the Tuolumne County, which is the second largest area in California for Bigfoot sightings, next to Humboldt, which is on the Oregon border, I believe. But I had pulled over so my children and I could play in the snow, and we had pulled over in an area that was a little camping site, and it had a little forestry building there. It wasn't huge. You could walk to the back. This was near Big Trees off of Highway 4. And I'm an intuitive. I don't know if you know what that is, but anyway, I sense things more than I see them. And my kids were laying in the snow making snow angels, and I was overcome literally with the worst feeling ever. I felt like I was being watched, and I didn't say anything to my children, but I pretended like I was freezing and said, "Come on, let's go." And we walked back to the car that I was in, and I kept turning around. I had this sense that I was being watched from behind the trees, and the trees were covered in snow. And something just kept drawing me that way, and I had this sense of urgency to just go back to the car as quickly as possible.
Okay,
and sometimes I get that, and it's pretty real. And I didn't see anything. I just felt it. I was overcome. I was almost sick to my stomach. I was overcome with it. So I know there's a lot of sightings in that area. I didn't think about it at the time, but now that I've been studying the missing 411 and all of that, I really believe that maybe there was something to that might be related to this forum. So that's all I have.
Oh, well, thanks, Paula. Exactly where did you say that occurred?
It was on a little turnoff near, I think it's called Big Trees, because that's where the big sequoias, you start getting into the big, huge trees out there, off of Highway 4. And I believe if you take Highway 4 north of Angels Camp, that whole area is, you start. This is the California side of Lake Tahoe, so I don't know if you've been to Lake Tahoe and you know what the terrain is there. A lot of pine trees, a lot of granite boulders. And so if you go through Angels Camp, you will eventually hit Big Trees on the way to South Lake Tahoe.
Oh, okay. So you didn't actually see it, you just heard it?
I don't recall hearing it, but that doesn't mean I didn't because I wasn't really tuned in like that. I just know that had this overwhelming sense that something was there. And I do recall feeling like I didn't feel like it was an animal like a bear. And I was visually scouring the area to make sure that there wasn't anything out there because we were the only ones out there. It was Thanksgiving time and there was not a soul out there. And of course, the forestry building office was all locked up for the season. So,
So you more or less just had the feeling of being watched or something like that?
yes, and I was drawn to the trees. I don't know if you've been out there, but the trees are huge, covered in snow, and I mean they go up forever. And I remember looking at the trees, thinking I was going to see something behind a tree. As weird as that sounds, never did, never saw it, but I again, it was overwhelming. I didn't want to alarm my children, but I was ready to get in that car and leave.
Well, that instinct is, well, it's unofficially, I think, accepted by science. Some scientists have, done little experiments to prove that it's true, but it's not widely accepted as fact. But I believe absolutely that that's an instinct that we've had for thousands and thousands, millions of years, is to know when something that could endanger us is near or watching us, or that like that.
I agree, and I think sometimes if you have to really you have to let that speak to you. I think we get too busy with all the noise in the world, and we don't hear or feel or see that as much as we could. And I always try to listen to that little voice. It's really saved me from a couple of instances I won't go into here, but it's always been very strong in me. There's a name for it, clairtessient, I think is the name of it. But when you separate yourself from all the noise in the world and you start listening to that, it's amazing what'll come to light.
Yeah. So Amy and Paula, what did y'all think about the encounter that I played tonight?
Where was where was that from? Was he in Colorado? Yeah,
I think he was talking about multiple encounters, and he was in the Colorado area. I think he was like in the Four Corners area because he talked about being on the other side of the state line and that kind of thing. And then the other one was in Colorado.
I thought it was fascinating. Those 10-footers and the small ones were 5 feet. That's pretty.
And I think you're letting off your push to talk too soon. You keep cutting off the end of your conversation.
I do.
Yeah.
I just said that the adults were 10-footers. Those were huge. That's just enormous. And 5 foot were obviously very young ones, I guess. Then,
Didn't he say that one of them was on its hands and knees and it was 5 feet tall? Did I hear him say it that?
yeah, I heard that.
Sorry, I'm trying to fix something. That's why I'm being so quiet.
Hi, Darcy.
Hey guys. Hello. I can. Darcy, I got you on YouTube also on my TV. I just lost it. I turned off the TV back. I couldn't hear you. Still nothing.
Of course. Of course not.
Paula, I was going to say, when I was listening to your account,
Okay, I'm
that
going to
that
use
was
both
very
microphones.
similar to the feeling I had when I was a kid. I don't know if you heard that, but I was down on a creek, and I got this sense of terror, and it just the feeling sounded very similar.
Did you see anything, or did you just felt something at that point?
I just felt it. I didn't see anything at all, but I played up and down the creek all day as a child. I must have been maybe 7, 8, something like that, and was never afraid. And I was just digging in the sand in the creek, and nobody anywhere near out in the boonies. And I just suddenly got an overwhelming sense of terror. My heart started pounding, and I just knew I had to get away. And I got up
Ian,
and
why don't you join
started
the Discord?
to
There's the
walk, and
link,
my legs
and
felt
tell your
like they were
story if you
just
like.
extremely heavy, like I could barely lift my legs, and that sense of terror was still there. And I honestly don't remember getting home. It scared me so bad.
Oh my. I remember walking towards the car thinking that the car kept getting further and further away.
That's
They
funny.
were
Go ahead. I just said that was funny. That's all. Hey, Ian, if you want to join Discord and tell your story, I put the link up right there in the chat.
Amy, where was the creek at? Where is your home?
West Tennessee, close to the Mississippi River, down in the bottom.
I get the impression that a lot of people are from the South on this.
I am.
Teresa is, Dee Dee is, not Rick. Brett is in Florida. I'm in Idaho now, but I was born and raised in Tennessee.
I looked at one of the maps that showed the sightings, and it mirrored the sightings for the missing people in the parks. Of course, it would, but that would make sense then.
Yeah, I did the same thing for Idaho, just to compare, and it's uncanny.
It's very interesting.
Yes.
True to form popped in earlier and said he had worked and he was tired and he was going to hang out for the show, but then he disappeared. So I guess he said, "I'm too tired," and he hit it.
Where's Matt? He's usually right here.
I don't know. I thought he was in here a little bit ago. I don't know where he went.
I missed out on everything at work tonight.
So, Darcy, has anything else happened at your place?
I've been working the last couple of nights, 12-hour shifts, so I wouldn't know. I come home and went to sleep.
No more door rattling, huh?
No, thank God. But I'm off all next week, so we'll see.
I'll be anxious to hear.
I'm hoping to be able to put up some cameras this weekend.
Yeah, that should be interesting.
I hope so.
You see ENG, Rick?
Yep. Hold on, Ian, and I'll unmute you. Okay, you should be good to go. As long as you need to set your side up for push to talk. You go into your voice settings, change it to push to talk, and then select the button you want to use. Unless you're on your phone, then it's just a little bar that shows up at the bottom. Anyway, folks, I guess that does it for the show for tonight. I'm trying to shorten them down because of how long it takes Google to process the things. I actually still have one from 2 days ago that still hasn't finished processing. So until next time, y'all take it easy. We will be in town hall after the show. So if you want to go ahead and click on the link and join us in town hall, continue discussion, that's fine. Until next time, y'all take it easy.